Hey everybody, it's Wags here from Eagle Dynamics. No, it's not, it's Prickly Hedgehog. Welcome to the channel, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again for another weekly update on news and information about DCS World. Here we go, let's look into this week's newsletter, which features primarily some new information about the Hind multi-crew, or the Petrovich as they have deemed the AI component of the helicopter's crew member, similar to Jester in the F-14A and B from Heatblur. And as well as some information about that, we've got some news about the KA-50, which is actually pretty exciting. There's a full exterior remodel being done. This is going to be referencing what they call now the Blackshark 3. And we're also going to get some new weapons for that, some air-to-air weapons, which, if you remember last year, there was some talk about the fact there were restrictions on what they could do with the KA-50 because of Russian law, essentially, which prohibited some modeling of these new weapons. So I don't know exactly what they've been able to release in light of that, and whether this is something that they can still release under the current laws, or if there's been a relaxation of that, or what have you. I imagine the former, but nevertheless, some exciting news about that fantastic helicopter. It looks fantastic, of course. It's fun to fly, and it's just yet another great Russian helicopter. So we're getting the Hind, of course, which is coming. We're getting an update to the Blackshark, and we are, of course, as many of you know and are excited about, going to get the Apache much later this year. The Hind should be coming this quarter, and it sounds like the KA-50 will be in the summer sometime in the Northern Hemisphere. And so we're going to talk about those things in a little bit more detail here, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the T-45 Goshawk, which was released by VNAO Simulations over the weekend, or late last week. And now I've been doing some surveys as well as I'm building up information, and I really appreciate all the contributions to that, the interaction with that, as I'm building some information and gathering data, if you like, for some projects that I have coming up and some work I'm doing with the Air Warfare Group. But let's start with the helicopter stuff, and Petrovich is what they're calling their AI component of the Hind, similar to Jester with Heatblur's F-14A and B in the game at the moment, which I think a couple of weeks ago got some pretty decent updates as part of 2.7. So some cool stuff. Now, the Petrovich AI's overall philosophy is based on what they call here the functionality first principle. The flight commands interface for pilot operator to pilot commander will be via a virtual HSI offering specific commands and sub-modes. This interface is controllable simply by use of the four-way hat or 4 buttons for keyboard ops, in addition to the use of the modern HOTAS practices of long and short presses. We also aim to use the pilot commander's line of sight for targeting, spotting, and designation functions with transmission to the pilot operator for further target recognition and engagement. A human delay in response times is simulated and is measured from tester multi-crew interaction data and military practice guidelines for target spotting, identification, and selection, as well as the correct click-to-weapon activation cycle times of the real platform. That's some cool stuff, I'm not going to lie. That's some detail that Eagle Dynamics has poured into to get some realism there. So it won't be an instant, command and then target select, so to speak. There will be some crew interface, if you like, to mimic what that would look like in real life. So that's some clever stuff. Now, in addition to that, they are also planning to prepare a special mode for multiplayer slots where Petrovich can be assigned limited abilities. These can be toggled per slot and chosen by the mission designer at will. As for the AI voices, they are planning to use 2 different Russian voices for each seat in the helicopter. Both gentlemen are former operational military pilots and will deliver English and Russian versions. More details will be available in future newsletters, plural. Wow. Yeah, I'm really excited for this aircraft. Even if you're not interested in the aircraft, I'm very interested in this AI, which I think is really cool. Obviously, a lot of work has gone into it, and it's a clever addition, especially for those of you that are, predominantly solo players. And based on the survey that I did recently this week, it sounds like most of you are. When I look through the stats that I have, and we know about this anyway, we have about 515 votes right now. About 22% of you are solo players. Only about 9% of people are actually multiplayer. So this is, I guess, one of the reasons why Eagle Dynamics has invested in this technology, similar to Heat Blur, to allow for people to play the product without being hindered, if you like, by the absence of a teammate. Now, multiplayer, of course, is essentially extremely fun, but there are some impediments to getting into the game, which I've had discussions with the Air Warfare group over. Steep learning curves, having the ability to find a friend, finding a newbie-friendly server. There's a lot of intimidation out there, and a lot of inexperience, if you like, in terms of how to interface properly with the multiplayer environment. And there's a lot of people also that are very successful at it and are having a blast. I certainly enjoy the small amount of multiplayer that I've had, learning from people with the Air Warfare group, but I know that's not every experience, and that came about by luck through direct invitation via Juice. So not everybody's in my position, though, that has somebody that was willing to fly with me. For many of you, I know that you play this game in isolation, and it's difficult to know where to start, and that's something I'd like to work on in some way, shape, or form, but how we go about that, I haven't quite yet worked out. So, and stemming from that survey, I asked, kind of how many people were, how many hours per week people were spending. And most of you, a good proportion of you, or at least 35%, indicated that they were spending at least 5 hours or more a week on this game, and the next step down is around about 2 to 5 hours per week. So yeah, interesting stuff. All right, so getting back to this newsletter, like I said, I'm really excited for the Hind. What we've seen in terms of snippets with the modules thus far looks really cool. And of course, any addition to the helicopter world is good stuff. And I know that there's some dedicated YouTubers out there to the helicopters. We are still seeing some snippets from Polychop, and somebody made a comment the other day that, hey, sadly it's not even on the horizon. I think it is on the horizon. I just don't know specifically where it's at. The Kiowa we're talking here has been put on hold as they were reworking some new stuff that Eagle Dynamics was putting into the game, which required them to go back and do some additional work to the module before it would be available for release. And so sadly, with that and COVID and all the rest of it, it sounds like they got, the project got delayed. So hopefully we see it this year. And again, we don't have specifics, but if Polychop wants to reach out and let us know where they're headed and what the direction is, we're seeing some snippets, like I said, some images and things, but we just don't have any firm timelines just yet. So, okay, moving on to the Blackshark 3, which I'm particularly excited about. It looks really cool. Eagle Dynamics have a great product here. This is one of the earliest modules in the game that was fully clickable. The Blackshark, and of course then the A10C, which received a similar in-depth kind of treatment. Again, a very sophisticated flight model and a very sophisticated aircraft. The Russians do some really cool stuff. I'd love to see the Alligator, which I think is the next step up from this. Is it the KA-60 or the KA-70? I forget which designation it is now. Somebody help me out there. But what another wonderful Russian helicopter. They do some cool stuff. I'm not going to lie. Some of the Russian equipment looks really cool. Even some, the Su-27 and some of the other aircraft that they have look cool. They do a nice job of making some pretty mean-looking machinery, and quite functional too. There's a lot of people, or at least a lot of nations, still flying Russian aircraft and helicopters in combat today in theaters around the world. So it's going to be exciting to see this come to fruition again, and let's see what they're talking about here. So they're saying they're progressing well with the development of this Blackshark. It's a well-known attack helicopter, and it's been given a brand new 3D model and an enhanced cockpit and new features that expand the gameplay, which include, like I mentioned before, the air-to-air Eagle missile implementation, as well as a new helicopter missile warning system, or MWS implementation. Now, the sensors of the MWS will be integrated into the onboard defense system with the ability to display detected missile threats on the Abris. Eagle missiles are similar to those used in manpads and can hit subsonic aircraft at ranges of up to 6 kilometers. To cater for these new missiles, they've also had to add, therefore, 2 new pylons, which are added to the wingtips, bringing the total number of hardpoints to 6. These missiles are operated in a similar mode to the bore sight mode, which is used on many Russian aircraft. Once power to the missile is on and the seeker axis directed to the target, the seeker can lock on to its heat signature. As the target enters the launch envelope of the weapon, the pilot can then fire and forget the missile, which is a really handy feature too, because you can duck out of cover, or duck back down into cover, excuse me. Now, existing owners of the Blackshark 2 are free to continue flying the legacy Ka-50, or they can upgrade to the new Blackshark 3 for a very reasonable price. Newcomers will be able to buy the full retail version as usual, of course. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, it sounds like it's going to be sometime in the summer for the Ka-53 Blackshark, which is really, really neat. Now, there is a campaign for the Ka-50 which was released recently. It's known as the Pandemic Campaign. It's set in the Iranian theater. A fictional group of terrorist gangs have taken advantage of the unstable political situation there. They've invaded part of the country, and the Iranian government therefore has requested military assistance from the Russian Federation. You will take part as a pilot of a Ka-50 attack helicopter in an anti-terrorist operation with a limited contingent of Russian armed forces. So what we've got here is 12 story missions, highly detailed briefings with pictures, hundreds of specially recorded voiceover messages and radio broadcasts, and you're going to be performing tasks day and night in different weather conditions. Very cool, of course, with the new clouds and all those kinds of things. These new campaigns, and even the pre-existing campaigns that have received the appropriate updates, are looking particularly cool and very involved and immersive. There is a wide range of tasks during these missions, including patrolling, escorting convoys with weapons, and transport helicopters, supporting ground forces, and tasks to destroy enemy groups. Of course, it requires the Blackshark 2 to be in ownership, as well as the Persian Gulf. And that brings us pretty much to the end of this week's newsletter. In discussion about the weather and the new clouds, I'm looking forward to continued updates there. I think if they're able to build in some specific weather features based on terrain and isolated weather events and things like that, sort of that more dynamic feature, again, it's going to just raise that level of immersion well beyond what we currently have, which already is at a very, very high level. And this game has just gone from strength to strength in the last month or so. And I think I don't think there's too much disagreement there. There are a few people that are unhappy, but I think for the most part, Eagle Dynamics has done a fantastic job of introducing what they have done thus far, and tweaks and improvements to what we've seen are only going to be beneficial for everybody involved as long as the path continues to process forward. Remember too, at some stage we're hoping to get some support for multi-threading and multi-core processors and stuff like that, and if that comes in as well, wow, the game is really looking exciting and it's going to be a lot more playable for a lot of people. And I've already heard some pretty good feedback from members of the community indicating that they've seen a major improvement in the general performance of the game. I certainly have experienced that, and hopefully it continues. Sometimes it lags depending on stuff going on. If there's too many objects or too many things in the air and stuff like that, that can bog it down. But if they can nail that out of existence and improve the FPS and playability of the game in certain conditions, then it's going to be enjoyable for all around, and it's also going to help people that have less superior systems at least have a playable experience. So good stuff. Okay, the T-45 Goshawk. Wow, what an introduction to this little module. I had a little bit of a tinker with this last week. We did a mass fly, actually. I only got a short amount of time on because I had to run and do another task, so I didn't have a lot of time online with my friends flying this around with the Air Warfare group, but we did have some pretty favorable impressions of the aircraft as it stands right now. And while there is work to do, no question about that, and I don't think VNAO would deny that, the aircraft shows a lot of promise. Now, if you're not familiar with this, basically it's essentially a naval variant of the British Hawk, and what they had to do was the Americans were looking for a training aircraft that was going to replace things like the A4 Skyhawk, so they latched onto this little beast, and they had to do a lot of adjustments and make the thing a lot stronger because they wanted it for naval ops and to train basically naval pilots how to launch and land off the carrier. So being a two-seater, it's a perfect training aircraft, and that's one of the reasons that we're excited about it for the air warfare group, based on formal discussions that I've had, and we can see the benefits of it over some of the other platforms that are currently in existence, the L-39 I think, and also the C-101, simply because you've got that naval option for carrier-based ops. So yeah, so the Americans basically, if you look, for want of a better words, kind of seized and latched onto this aircraft. It had to be, completely upgraded in terms of strength. They had to widen the landing gear and strengthen it, and they did some changes to parts of the wings and things to square them off, and they had to put in, what do they do now? So they had to put in a leading edge slat system as well, which is able to help the wing in low speed situations, obviously, so you don't have that wing stall. There were some other little features they put on there as well to again help move air around the wings a little bit better for those low speed approaches at the carrier. So really it's a much beefier aircraft than the standard Hawk in terms of its structural capacity. But again, really neat introduction to the game, and I'm looking forward to seeing its evolution. For a free aircraft, it's pretty far along, and if they can continue developing it into a ED recognized module, then I think they're onto a winner. Let me know what your thoughts are on that T-45. I've been pretty impressed, like I said, and as you can tell, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this aircraft evolves in the game, along with all the other things we have going on. There's so much stuff happening right now. So one of the last surveys I did, and we'll wrap up this week's video with this, was where people are getting their information from, and I get the impression that there is a need for some more tutorials out there that are not necessarily being covered by some of the big guys, if you like. A lot of you are grabbing information from YouTubers like Grim Reapers, of course, who are, well renowned on YouTube for DCS content and IL-2 content, amongst other things, as well as Red Kite, of course, Jabbers, Ralphie Dude. Ralphie Dude does some fantastic stuff with the A10C2 particularly, and the A10C. Growling Sidewinder, those guys. There's a lot of information out there, and sometimes the finer things or the smaller things get overlooked with whatever else they're working on, which is usually the more exciting stuff. And I think there is still a need, based on what I'm hearing from the community, for some tutorials related to air person ship, formation flying, comms around the airfield, and some stuff to do with multiplayer perhaps as well that would be useful. So let me know what your thoughts are about that below as well, if you have a comment. If you would like to see tutorials on this channel, let me know, and we can work on some stuff, and put in some comments on things you're struggling with perhaps too. That might help, and I'll maybe put in another survey so I can gather some more information. That's what I'm kind of doing right now, is just trying to pare back some feedback from the community as to what they are looking for with regards to having a more positive experience with the game, because we are flying some pretty sophisticated jets, and things like this T-45 are going to be helpful, I think, for people that are wanting to learn the basics but don't want to get bogged down or overwhelmed with the sensory information and the layers of information on MFDs in the more sophisticated jets like the Hornet, obviously, and the A10C too, particularly, but also the Viper, which is still quite a lot of work needs to be done on that before it's up to the prior two aircraft that I mentioned, but it's getting there. So there are people that are more interested in the mechanics of flying rather than worrying about all the other weapons related material that can be pretty overwhelming at times. So again, let me know what you think. We'll wrap it up. I just want to say thanks again for all the support on the channel. Please keep the likes and subscribes coming. Don't forget to do that. It costs nothing, of course, but it helps the channel chug along. So, alright guys, and ladies, if you're listening, take care out there. I really appreciate all the feedback, like I said, and keep it coming. We'll see you next time. This is Prickly Hedgehog out. Take care.